welcome to Daily Debrief brought to you by People's Dispatch. I'm Pragya. Jeremy Corbyn led the Labour Party to new heights. However, the current leader, Keir Starmer, has declared that Corbyn cannot contest. Next, we look at the conclusions from this winter's Executive Board meeting of the World Health Organization. And finally, in sports, Arsenal continued its losing streak in a clash with Manchester City in the Premier League. Manchester is, of course, fighting off charges of over 100 financial breaches, which aren't going away soon. Jeremy Corbyn spent his life in the Labour Party, but Keir Starmer, his successor as leader, has said Corbyn won't contest next year's general election from the party. Labour looks set to improve its performance, but there's ferment in the party, and it's not just because the UK equality watchdog has ruled the party under Corbyn did not have anti-Semitism adequately in check. Abdul from People's Dispatch joins us in the studio to discuss the implications. Abdul, thanks for joining us. Abdul, what has Keir Starmer actually said and why? What is the background to this announcement?
According to Starmer, Corbyn will not contest on Labour Party ticket ever. It means his in the coming elections in 2024, most likely the North Islington seat, Labour will have its own candidate other than Corbyn for the first time since 1980s. So that is the announcement. It basically it follows what happened in 2020. Corbyn was already suspended from the parliamentary party. He is sitting in the parliament as an independent candidate. He is no more recognized as a Labour Party MP. Of course, the reason behind it was given that during his tenure as the head of the party, the Labour Party, there were allegations of anti-Semitism, a large number of allegations of anti-Semitism against various members of the Labour Party, and he did not do enough to control that rise of anti-Semitism. That was the reason. Of course, there are various other political calculations behind this particular decision, but that's how it is portrayed in the popular media. Starmer also very strongly came out in support of his statement of not allowing Corbyn to contest on the Labour Party ticket, saying that all those who disagree with the Labour Party, this particular new Labour which has emerged under his leadership, should go out of the party. There is no need for them to be in the party. It means there is a large-scale kind of purge of all those who were considered to be the supporters of, he is hinting, of course, supporters of the Corbyn. It means there is not only the going away of Corbyn and his supporters from the Labour Party would mean that the larger political orientation of the party is also going to be shifted. And I think Starmer is already hinting that this party is not the party which was there in 2019. Mm-hmm. So, and it seems that there is some kind of popular support to what Starmer is doing, because Labour Party's popularity has surged for various reasons, of course, in the last few months.
Right. Abdul, can you go into some of the details of how the Labour Party has been changing, how its position has been changing on the key issues?
Exactly. That is very important point to recall at this moment. During the Corbyn's time, the Labour Party had shifted to the left from what used to be Tony Blair's Labour Party, which was considered to be as right-wing as any conservative party in UK. So during Corbyn, it was considered that the party has shifted towards left on its position on public sectors, on its position on labour, on its position on European Union and Brexit and so on and so forth. And even after 2019, on Palestine in particular, basically led to the allegations of anti-Semitism. Corbyn has taken very strong positions vis-a-vis Israeli occupation of Palestine, and that basically resolution after resolution were adopted during the Labour Party conferences in which the Israeli occupation was criticized. That led to a larger allegation of anti-Semitism, and that was, of course, the leftward shift of Corbyn, which also, by the way, saw a huge surge in the membership of the party in the UK, a kind of revival. In 2017, in fact, Labour got one of the highest historical amount of vote in its history since 1945. So all those things basically meant that Labour was shifting towards more left. And that was, of course, not acceptable by the loyalists of Tony Blair, who is still in the party, another right-wing or centrist section of the Labour Party. And that ultimately led to, when in 2019 election results came, of course, that led to a kind of, you can say, some internal coup within the Labour Party, and ultimately removal of Corbyn from the leadership. And since then, by the way, the Labour Party has shifted back to what we call centre, but it seems more towards the right. Particularly Corbyn's position on Ukrainian war,
right,
and his attempts to kind of take a position in which NATO anti-NATO positions have been criticized by the current Labour leadership. And they have become much more nationalist and much more pro-NATO than Labour has ever been in its history. So that you can see the shift towards centre and the right has happened since Corbyn has been removed from the leadership. And that shift is basically a populist shift, which particularly because the Conservative Party it looks like in a very chaotic situation, that has basically led to some kind of popular realignment towards the Labour Party.
All right, Abdul, thanks a lot for joining us with that update. Before the 194 World Health Organization members meet every year, a smaller executive board discusses a wide range of global health policy issues. Jyotsna from the People's Health Movement attended the executive board meetings in Geneva, and we asked her what inputs it would serve up at the World Health Assembly later this year in May. Jyotsna, good to have you here and good to have you back from Geneva. So, Jyotsna, first of all, the EB meeting is supposed to feed into the WHO deliberations in May. Can you tell us what the key inputs were this year?
Yeah, so just to explain simplistically, executive board meeting, I mean, it has limited number of countries who are on the board, and the deliberations happen as to how to plan and go ahead with the World Health Assembly in May, where all the countries who are part of WHO, which is 194 member states and almost all the countries in the world, are a part of, and they get to participate and put forth their positions and ideas and everything. So EB is crucial because from here the agenda will actually be decided for the World Health Assembly. We'll get to know the exact agenda only a couple of weeks before the assembly happens, but a lot of things are going to happen in between. For example, there will be important meetings regarding the global architecture on health emergencies, preparedness, response and resilience, in short, pandemic treaty as we call it. Okay. There are some amendments proposed for the international health regulations, which is a mechanism in place since 2005 that is going to be talked in between among the countries. A very important thing to look forward to for a lot of us who work on equity and access, equal access to medicines and medical products, is a resolution on diagnostics, which Eswatini, they have already talked about it. They are going to propose it and the resolution will come. There will be deliberations on that. And the idea is how to provide equity and equality in accessing diagnostics. So as we know, during COVID-19 time, this obviously became a huge issue because if you do not know why you have fever or cold and cough at that point of time. You do not know whether to take COVID medication or any other medication. Do you need to be isolated or not? So because we realized there was a point of time, and it continues even till today, where in many countries you have home-based diagnostic kits which you can use at home, free of cost available or at very nominal cost. But in majority of the poor countries, you still do not have those facilities. So that should not continue. We are also realizing that, for example, for antibiotic resistance, to tackle antibiotic resistance, which is another underlying pandemic. Anybody who reads the Hindu newspaper knows that today Dr. Soumya Swaminathan, who was earlier with WHO, she resigned recently, she has written a very insightful piece today where she's talking about that COVID, finally it's in the last legs, but antibiotic resistance is something which is a sitting pandemic, and we are all going to face major issues if we don't tackle. So there again, diagnostics become very important. And the same thing that, if I know what bacteria has affected me, and what is the resistance to which antibiotics, I can be given rational medication. So to give proper medication, diagnosis and tests are important. And if you do not have access to them, then everything falls apart.
Absolutely.
Right. So this is going to be one thing to look forward to, and I hope everybody works with their country governments to see to it that a good resolution gets passed, if at all. It should be able to tackle intellectual property barriers, trade secrets, and many other things. The other thing is there is going to be a discussion on clinical trials. Again, in COVID, we saw that there were so many medications available and the vaccines. But to know how to combine them to provide the best treatment across the countries needed a lot of coordination and people to come on board. The companies should have come on board. The countries should have come on board. So all of those things, how do you do in a collaborative form? And it is true for everything, for cancer, for everything. You need different populations be represented in clinical trials. You need pregnant women firstly. I was looking at it, and this is a study from the 1990s, pretty old, but I don't think things have changed till now, where for many diabetes related medications, 19%, 21% are women, and that's all. So when you give the medicine to them, you really do not know whether it will suit their bodies or not. Pregnant women are so these are the kind of things which need to be tackled, and they will be up for discussion in May this year. So that's what we look forward to.
Jyotsna, it sounds like the pandemic is casting a very long shadow. The pandemic treaty, tell us what to expect over there.
So it is. So there are two things. And we are not in a really great position. It is not a very good thing which is happening in terms of discussions at the moment. I think the countries, especially the developing countries, really have to pick up their game to demand certain things which should happen. So what is happening is there are two things which are being discussed. One is the IHR amendments, which is International Health Regulations 2005. There are amendments being proposed to the current mechanism. And the other is the pandemic treaty. And they go hand in hand. Now, the problem is that everybody is focusing on pandemic treaty, and we are talking about it obviously because of the pandemic. But one needs to know that IHR forms the basis of anything. Because, for example, if you have a health emergency, the way earthquake in Turkey and Syria showed us, that's an emergency. Pandemics, of course, are an emergency. Ebola was an emergency. There were floods in Pakistan earlier this year. That's an emergency. So how should the internationally we should come together and form that solidarity to come up with mechanisms to deal with these emergencies. All right. And in that, again, equitable access, it's like for Ebola, there has been an almost ready vaccine for 10 years. But because there was no market, nobody worked on it. It was a Canadian company which had it. So these kind of things should not happen in any sort of an emergency. That is the brick, that foundational work that IHR does. So there are going to be meetings till May. We will know in May what is the outcome of those meetings. In February, there are going to be those meetings. So that is something we should be following. On top of that, pandemic becomes one part, that if the health emergency of pandemic hits, then what, how will things be? So both are interrelated and they should be talked about. It is a real, problematic thing that's happening, where the developed countries are focusing only on surveillance when it comes to pandemic, where they're saying we should know where the pandemic will emerge, or as soon as the pandemic emerges. They are not focusing on the response. It is in response that equity comes.
Absolutely.
A poor country can tell you that there is an impending pandemic, probably. What will you do? You will impose travel bans. We don't want that. We want medicines to go. We want diagnostics to go. We want the spread to stop, but we want people to be treated as well. Right? So those are the so that response is equally or probably more important, I would say. But because developed countries are very inward looking, they're like, once we know what is happening, we will save our people. We don't care what happens to the rest of the world, which is not something that should happen. So, I hope that the developing countries do better in terms of negotiations and put their foot down that we won't accept what's happening at the moment.
Okay, Jyotsna. Thanks a lot for joining us with that update.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Manchester City hit a 3-1 victory against Arsenal, chasing a third consecutive title at the Premier League Championships. It is now in firm contention to retain the title. The win has brought back the spotlight to the charges Man City faces as well. Siddhant Ane joins us over Zoom to discuss those. So, Siddhant, thanks for joining us. Siddhant, what's happening in the Premier League?
Exciting times, Pragya, as always in the Premier League. There's always it's the most juicy of all the distractions floating around in the universe these days. There was last week the story that we spoke about regarding the charges framed by the Premier League against Manchester City, which has been arguably over the last 10-12 years the most successful club in the Premier League. And they are, of course, the defending league champions. And last night or early this morning, our time, they took on Arsenal, where the protege, in some ways, Pep Guardiola's former assistant, Mikel Arteta, is now the head coach. He has never taken a point off Pep Guardiola's teams in Premier League competitions. And this was because of the way Arsenal have been playing. They are, like I mentioned, league leaders with a game in hand. They were before the game started. There was a lot of hope and expectation among Arsenal fans that this will be something different, and so essentially what made it really interesting was in the run up to the game, all of those charges etc. were forgotten. The two managers in their interviews and things like that talked about love and respect and all of these things that we like to hear when it comes to football. On the pitch, of course, we know now it was a disappointing night for Arsenal fans, as usual, at home losing 3-1 to Man City. And I guess in that sense, underlining the fear that Arsenal fans carry in their hearts at all times. Because you're only one game or a few minutes away from an implosion. I don't think that is the current scenario as far as Arsenal Football Club's men's team is concerned. But inching in that direction. There was a loss to Everton, who ranked much lower in the league in the past couple of weeks. So they've had difficulties. 15 points they've taken off the top 6 in the Premier League this season, which is it's a really great achievement. I don't think Arsenal have done that in a long while. So obviously the expectations of what is the most expensive season's ticket in world football. The expectations have gone up. People are booking their flights from China, from India, from all kinds of places to go and watch the end of the season, expecting something that hasn't happened in a while to happen. But Pep Guardiola and his team yesterday sort of showed the difference that there is, the difference that a few $1 billion can make between a team of challengers and a team that is created, constructed, designed, bought to win trophies.
Right, Siddhant, but not the charges are not going to be completely forgotten, are they? In fact, somebody said after the result that, look, we won because we had to show that these charges aren't true and so on. So, those charges aren't disappearing.
No, they're not disappearing at all. Like we spoke of last week, Pragya, the independent commission that is looking into these charges and going to look at the books of Manchester City in the context of how the charges have been framed by the Premier League will do that over the course of the next few months. The two have no real correlation in some sense. And Pep Guardiola, who is normally extremely guarded and quiet when it comes to sort of any kind of political or even vaguely controversial discussion when it comes to things happening outside the pitch, has actually come out and said, that he is either the club has lied to him completely, but based on the evidence that he has, that he thinks it's all good. Otherwise, he would have left by now. So the two things are in some ways unconnected. The guys who have been put together on the pitch, they know that they are among the most valued in this commodity, sort of commodified football valuation transfer market. And they know that they have been brought to Manchester City to justify the spending of these billions of petrodollars and to win trophies. So for them, the objective is quite clear, to win games and to keep winning trophies. They've won, I think, 14 domestic trophies in the time that the investigation covers. So for them, yeah, it's an iteration of things carrying on as they were, and them sticking to doing their jobs. But that has little bearing on what might happen with the investigation and what might follow at the end. So important in that sense for Arsenal to even, I don't know, it's strange, or we don't know how it will pan out, but even for Arsenal to maintain second place, because come end of the season, you never know.
Right.
Manchester City might be docked points, they might be stripped of their position in the Premier League, or they might not be considered for the trophy, as it were. So second place might be vitally important this season. So not just Arsenal, all the other teams in the running as well really have something to go at.
Great, Siddhant. Thanks for joining us, and see you again soon.
Thanks for having me, Pragya. If I can do a quick shameless plug, we'll be doing a longer discussion on this game and what's happening in the Premier League at large from of course, an Asian viewers, Asian fans perspective on our football channel, 420 grams. So I don't know if our show will be out before then, but that's at 7 p.m. live, but you can always check it out later. The YouTube channel is 420 grams. Thanks again.
And that is all we have for today. Thank you for watching Daily Debrief. Do come back to us tomorrow. You can find more of our stories on our website, peoplesdispatch.org, and our regular updates are on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.